Have you ever seen a long, worm-shaped tube snaking along the edge of a hill at a construction site and wondered what it was and why it was there? Chances are you saw a compost-filled sediment filter, or sock, placed there to trap the particles eroding from disturbed soil areas, which are very common on road, building, and other construction sites. This sediment can pollute the water we drink and the water fish and wildlife need to survive. Compost filter socks are just one type of sediment barrier you might see around Pennsylvania. You may also notice fences made out of filter fabric or others made out of straw bales. Construction projects usually involve plant removal and earth disturbance to shape the land for new buildings and roads. Unfortunately, when grass, trees, and other plants are removed and the topsoil is moved around, the freshly exposed earth becomes vulnerable to erosion and to being washed away by stormwater during rainstorms. When this happens, the eroding soil becomes sediment pollution that can turn our waterways muddy and cloudy, making it harder for fish and plants to live and more difficult for us to purify for drinking. When creeks or rivers that provide drinking water get increasingly muddy, it can lead to the upgrading of water treatment facilities, which is a big expense, especially for small communities. One way to help prevent sediment pollution is to use temporary sediment filters like socks or filter fabric fences, and more permanent runoff management systems like stormwater basins. Here is a good example from Carlisle, PA, of both temporary and permanent practices in place. Environmental engineer Justin Doty discusses how these systems work.
Best management practices are in place to treat runoff from impervious surfaces. That includes rooftops, pavement, sidewalk. These areas have different hydrologic characteristics than the grass or the trees that were there beforehand. So what these BMPs do is receive the runoff, clean the water, and then release it at a rate that's comparable to what it was doing before it was developed.
Barriers are usually placed along the downslope perimeter or edge of a construction site to filter stormwater as it flows downhill. Water or melting snow can pass through the barrier, but most soil particles are trapped behind it. This filter fence is placed between the disturbed soil in the construction zone and the stream at the bottom of the hill. Same with this straw bale fence. Sediment filters are often required by law. Indiana County Conservation official Samantha discusses the role of these controls in the permitting process.
By law, to obtain a permit, E&S controls have to be submitted along with the plan. In order for that plan to be implemented, it has to be reviewed and approved by the Conservation District in that county.
The permitting process often also requires controls to remain in place after construction is complete, until all the bare soil areas have dense vegetation growing or are stabilized with rock. On this site, for example, straw mulch is stabilizing the soil until the newly planted grass becomes thick enough to provide permanent protection. In Cumberland County, conservation officials get good feedback regarding the use of socks compared to silt fences, according to erosion and sediment specialist Kim Falvey.
I think in general, people are happy with them. Contractors like them. They're a lot easier to install as opposed to silt fence. And everything we hear is positive that they work a lot better than the silt fence does.
By helping to keep our local waters clean, sediment barriers and filters offer the added benefit of improving fish habitat and water recreation, both important parts of Pennsylvania's economy. Temporary sediment filters are just one of the many best management practices being used in communities to protect water quality. When you see them, be thankful that someone is working to help keep our waters clean.